I'm going to break down the 3 hardest things about displaying my action figure collection and what I do to combat those things. If you have an action figure collection of any size, I think you'll find these things are very relatable. I've been collecting action figures for over 40 years and I'm in a pretty privileged position where I can display a lot of my collection in this room. But whether you've got a shelf or two, whether you've got a few items just hanging on a wall, or if you've got an entire room for your collection, we all have the same problems. Figures jumping off the shelf at any given time, whether it's just figures at the front of your shelf or figures a couple of rows back, which is then going to have a ripple effect, and before you know it, your entire collection's on the floor. And just when you're putting those figures back on the shelf, you end up knocking a couple more, and again the whole thing starts again. And it's not just loose figures jumping off shelf. If you've got a carded collection, if you've got figures up on a wall, hanging on a wall, yep, they do that too. I've gotten very used to that sound you hear in the night, in the middle of the night, where you hear this thud. Did it come from the kitchen? Has someone broken into the house? No, it's an action figure just falling off a shelf. How do you combat that ripple effect? Well, maybe you've just got your collection too tightly packed in. I have a variety of action figure stands. Some are clear, some are black, some are grey, some are tan. Depending on who's going to be standing on them, try and keep them uniform in their own little factions, but really it's only for set figures. I don't try and have them on every single shelf. It's kind of a last resort. Some figures just will not stand on their own. Some figures don't even have footholds. You can see my Rebels Inquisitors back there. The 7th sister is currently being propped up by the 5th brother because she has no way of standing on her own. Some of these figure stands are interlocking, so that kind of can make for its own little diorama piece, if you like, sort of little floor. I've got my pod racers set up in that way. Gives them a bit of height as well because they are quite short characters. Dust. The eternal struggle. In this room, I can't keep it dust free. It's you look closely, you will find dust. If you don't look too closely, you'll still find dust. So what's the best way to combat that? I use a microfiber cloth. I've got big items in the room as well. I've got the Ghost just behind me. I've got Millennium Falcon just in front. Generally just wipe those down every day or two, just to try and capture dust that's just in the room. But yeah, no, you're going to have to every now and then take some figures off the shelf, give it a whole wipe down, put them back. But then it comes back to how do you want to display your collection? I like to physically, hold my collection. I don't like everything behind glass. I do have some glass cabinets, but in general, the majority of my collection is accessible. So my collection is constantly evolving. I'm constantly tweaking those shelves. I'm constantly moving things around. So if everything was behind glass, that probably wouldn't really work for me. I say I like something physically to hold with this collection. I think that's a big part of it. Nevertheless, things like my Kenner figures back there, yeah, they're behind a cabinet. They're not going to be played with. From time to time, they'll come out for a bit of a dusting. But yeah, generally they'll be behind glass. My Tatooine display down here is also behind glass. I've got a glass cabinet, but they also need lighting. They're quite dull in there. They don't seem to show up as well. Not for me anyway. Lighting becomes another issue in itself. So yeah, it's great if you want a museum-like quality to your collection. Everything behind glass, everything well lit, great. But that limits the playability. And that gets me onto my third point, which is space. No matter how big or small our collection is, there's never enough space. Whether you've got one shelf with just a nice, I don't know, your first 12 figures from Kenner, or if you've got an entire room, you will find a way to fill it. I've been guilty of putting every figure I've got on display, cramming them all in, and sometimes it can look good, sometimes it can just look cluttered. So what do? For me, the best way to combat this is rotation and curation. Now, Star Wars is a big universe. We've got 40 plus years of content, films, TV series, and if you're like me who likes to collect a bit of everything, you don't necessarily have enough space to display everything. So for me, we're in 2025, it's an anniversary year of Revenge of the Sith. I'm curating a display around Revenge of the Sith. What that does mean though, for some films, some episodes, some figures, they're not going to be on display, at least not for a few months. So they're all off the shelf. So just removing a few figures or a few factions maybe, or maybe a particular episode or film, just temporarily, will free up space. And when you bring them back into your collection, it will feel fresh again, which is great. I love to display my entire empire, all of my Imperials, but they take up a lot of room. They've got the best vehicles, they've got the best gadgets, they have space walls now. There's a lot of space that they take up. Not only that, is that you want them on various different shelves. If you've set your display up in sort of action scenes, maybe you've got an Endor diorama or the Battle of Jeddah, you want Imperials here, there and everywhere. So they don't just fit on one shelf or a set of shelves. They look great in uniform, but also you want some stormtroopers battling various characters throughout. So yeah, I do like to take some figures out of the collection just for a little while, bring them back when the time is right. Currently, I don't have a lot of sequel trilogy figures out. I don't have my Macquarie concept figures out. I don't have my Clone Wars animated figures out. All of that takes up a lot of space. What do you do when the next big ticket item is coming? Obviously, we're all very excited when the HasLab Ghost was revealed. Some of us have got the big Millennium Falcon or a big AT-AT. You've got Jabba's Palace. This takes up space. Coming up next is the HasLab Cantina. Oh my goodness, how amazing does that look? But realistically, when it arrives, where are you going to put it? Yes, collecting anxiety is a real thing. This year, Hasbro is doing a push on Return to Tatooine. So I do have some shelves dedicated to Tatooine. Quite a lot of shelves, because obviously it appears in quite a lot of the movies. You can see Jabba's Palace back here. But yeah, that means other things are just not on display. In this room in particular, I don't have Hoth. I have Hoth Secret Rebel base outside of the room somewhere. But yeah, you can't have everything on display all the time. Or you could, and it might just look cluttered. And then we get back to that whole things falling over. So what's the best way to display your collection? Do you have play or display? Do you have your figures uniform? Like the Emperor's Arrival, Stormtroopers just lined up. They look great when they're like that. It doesn't work for every character, it doesn't work for every film or scene. Or do you have your battles? Do you have a Battle of Endor? Do you have the Battle of Hoth? Do you have the Mos Eisley Cantina set up? I mean, the Mos Eisley Cantina probably wouldn't look great if you had all your aliens just facing forward. Maybe it would, but for me, that's not how I want to display. So there's a bit of balance to it. So that's it for me. That's the 3 hardest things I find when displaying a collection. I'd love to know what yours are and how you combat them. I'm David the Dead. Thanks for watching. If you like what you've seen, please drop a like, comment below, subscribe to the channel if you feel like it. We're all collectors, we're all in this together, and I'd love to hear from you guys. How do you display your collection, and what are the things that drive you mad about displaying? I'm amazed nothing's fallen off the shelf in this time. And now I'm off to clean the room.